So it is then 80 years ago to the day that the then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill walked down the Champs-Élysées with the then head of France's interim government after liberation, General Charles de Gaulle, to mark Armistice Day, the event 2 months after the end of the Second World War to remember those who died in the First. It was the last time that a British leader attended the Armistice Day event here in Paris. Today, though, that anniversary marked as the current British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is here in Paris for today's Armistice Day commemorations. The day's events also providing an opportunity for Starmer to talk with the French President Emmanuel Macron, notably about Ukraine amid the election of Donald Trump. Well, let's cross then live to our reporter Clovis Casali, who's at those commemorations for us by the Arc de Triomphe. Clovis, give us an idea of what we're due to see, what to expect over the next few hours.
The French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer currently at the Élysée Palace for a bilateral meeting, private talks, and they have a lot of hot topics to discuss. Then the two leaders will be heading very close to the Élysée Palace, first to the statue of Georges Clemenceau, who's nicknamed the Father of Victory for his role in World War I. They will be laying a wreath. And then Keir Starmer and President Emmanuel Macron will be heading to the statue, very close also, of Winston Churchill, who was in charge during World War I, but did not have the role that he played in World War II. Pivotal, of course, in defeating Nazi Germany, but also helping France, helping the resistance, helping General de Gaulle, and helping France remain independent and not under US authority after World War II. And of course, Keir Starmer and President Macron will then be coming here to the Arc de Triomphe. You can see behind me, the French flag is here, flag bearers in place, and many people, officials, and also we saw high school students in the stands. And I can tell you, just for the anecdote, we heard earlier the national anthem, both of Britain and of France. And God Save the King performed just before the Marseillaise here at the Arc de Triomphe. Quite a scene, very unusual indeed. 80 years ago, Winston Churchill was here, this time Keir Starmer.
As you mentioned, Clovis, there's set to be interesting talks going on as well, of course, between Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron surrounding the events today.
Surrounding the events, not least the election, the shock election, one could say, of Donald Trump in the United States. And whether it's Emmanuel Macron or Keir Starmer, they did not have the smoothest of relations with Donald Trump, or at least in the comments they made. Take the UK, well, members of Keir Starmer's cabinet criticising Donald Trump in the past. It's been the same, it has to be said, in France. Both leaders are rather suspicious in the past of Donald Trump, but now Donald Trump will be in charge very soon at the White House, and the US have always been a key ally of France and of the UK, and therefore it's important to have the smoothest of relations with the United States. Both leaders, Keir Starmer, President Macron, will be talking about Donald Trump. What does it mean for Europe? What does it mean for the future of the NATO alliance with London and Paris, of course, two key players in NATO? We know Donald Trump has demanded that NATO members step up financial contribution up to 3% of GDP. Well, it will remain to be seen if these NATO members do so. We know they are willing to contribute more, especially with the Russian threat, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Donald Trump saying, "I will bring back peace in a day." Well, in the meantime, it's Europe that's at risk with Ukraine so close to European borders. And just to wrap up, a couple of other topics to be discussed. Of course, Gaza, horrific humanitarian situation in Gaza. France and the UK agree on that, and they will be discussing that. So NATO, Ukraine, Donald Trump, Gaza, a lot on the plate of Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron.
Clovis, thanks very much. Clovis Casali joining us there from the Arc de Triomphe. More from Clovis during the rest of the programme. Well, joining us now is former Professor of Modern European History at Trinity College Dublin, John Horne. He's also Vice President of the Research Centre at the Histoire de la Grande Guerre. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme. Let's reflect a bit on the past, first of all. I mean, why do you think it's so important to remember not only those, of course, involved in World War I, those fallen heroes, if you like, in World War II, but also those who've fallen in all other conflicts conflicts around the world?
Well, good morning, Stuart, and thanks for having me on. Yes, I think it is important, particularly for Britain and France and the countries who consider themselves victors in World War I. The ceremonies which were kind of invented, these modern ceremonies with the unknown soldier, the 2-minute silence and so on, they were invented between 1918 and 1920. They have, if you like, become a framework in which we remember the dead and what those dead died for in the 2 world wars, and perhaps more controversially in other conflicts since then. Of course, we always have to bear in mind that there are many countries in the world, including those defeated in World War I, notably Germany, Austria, and so on, which don't mark today. So it's a particular ceremony, and it doesn't involve the whole planet.
A particular ceremony as well, amid several anniversaries, if you like. It was 6 years since many world leaders gathered at the Arc de Triomphe to mark the centenary of the end of World War I. And also, we've been showing that photo earlier in the programme, 80 years since Churchill was here in Paris at the end of World War II, if you like, for Armistice Day, to mark events in World War I.
You're right. And it's very interesting in the French context how the Second World War is also framed by the First World War. So we know that on the 11th of November 1940, students of Paris made one of the first demonstrations against the German occupation. And so I suppose, in a sense, coming after the liberation of Paris in August 1944, that a commemoration on the 11th of November 1944 with Churchill present was a statement that victory had occurred twice again, a very different kind of victory, obviously, in 44-45, but it was re-establishing a continuity.
And you mentioned once again that whole host of countries commemorating today.
That's right. I mean, if we think of the countries which are commemorating, they will be the United Kingdom, which did it yesterday since 1920 in the UK. It's always been the nearest Sunday to the 11th of November, Remembrance Sunday, with that very solemn ceremony. I'm sure many viewers will have seen extracts from it at the cenotaph, that empty tomb which is there, has been there since 1920 to encapsulate the dead, those who couldn't be there at the sacrifice, but who were there, the dead, the ghosts, if you like, at the heart of that ceremony. And that was replicated in all 4 parts of the United Kingdom. Controversially, in Northern Ireland, there the First World War is still a live issue. So the leader of Sinn Féin, for the first time ever, attended a commemoration ceremony on the 11th of November because that memory is associated with the Unionist and the British tradition in Northern Ireland. But in Australia, Canada, countries such as that, it will be commemorated. And it's perhaps worth mentioning that in Britain this year, the second only memorial to Commonwealth soldiers, which means in particular Indian and Pakistani soldiers, it was all the Indian subcontinent at the time, who fell in the 2 world wars, have been commemorated. So that's an interesting development, that these immigrant communities, now British people of Indian or Pakistani descent, are commemorating the deaths of their forebears in the Indian Army in the 2 world wars.
And just finally, Clovis Casali was talking about the fact that obviously the 2 leaders at the Arc de Triomphe today are going to have a lot of other issues to discuss. I mean, it's deeply worrying, isn't it, that those wars that we remember from the past are still going in other areas of the world.
I couldn't agree more. And I was there. I was present as a member of the French Mission du Centenaire on the 11th of November 2018. I remember very, very clearly that in the traditional way, President Macron and all of the leaders of the European countries met halfway down the Champs-Élysées and walked up to the Arc de Triomphe. They took their places. Then President Trump deliberately arrived late. And after him, and giving a little victory signal to him, arrived Vladimir Putin. So already those tensions were there. But President Macron, in the very fine speech he gave on the 11th of November 2018, he said, 1918, c'était il y a 100 ans, cela semble loin, et pourtant c'était hier. 1918, it's 100 years ago, it seems a long way off, and yet it's only yesterday. And what I would say is that for me, and I think for many people, the Great War, and it was a catastrophic war, the Great War seems closer now, closer to us, because history bends. It's like a river with turns and bends. It's closer to us now than it was in 2018. the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, both of them directly coming out of the First World War and its aftermath. And the kind of wars which are being fought now mean that if you reread President Macron's speech of 2018, in which he hoped that once more European unity, the United Nations, and the strengthening of Western allies all will be reaffirmed by the centenary of the Great War, I think we can say today, lamentably, it's the opposite that's happened.
Great to talk to you on the programme today. Thanks very much for joining us. John Horne, former Professor of Modern European History at Trinity College Dublin. Thanks very much.